Hi, y'all. Hopefully, the sound is okay. I'm having problems with my mic. I can't get it to connect. And the cat, the cat is doing what the cat does. Say hi, cat. So it's just a crazy morning. But anyway, hello. Today, we're going to talk about how to wick your candle jars. So I'll start this podcast off by saying that I am in quite a few Facebook groups. And what I have noticed in most of the groups is that a lot of people spend way too much time talking about wicking jars. Um, One thing that I will say consistently is that you're not perfect. So there's no such thing as a perfect candle. You will never make a perfect candle, and no matter how many times you do it, it will never be perfect. And so when we start uh, our journey into this business, we think that everything has to be perfect, and we start overanalyzing everything. One of the pet peeves that I personally have is that when people in our space buy other makers' products and then analyze their product. I don't think that's fair because we don't do that to Bath and Body Works. You don't go buy a Bath and Body Works candle and bring it home and analyze the melt pool and the wicks. You don't do that. I know you don't. And so it's not fair to do that to another maker. Um, I my preference is to wish people well in their journey. If they have a problem, then I'll try to assist them, but I would never buy somebody's product and then get on Facebook and talk about it. I just think that that's rude. But that's my opinion. So, one of the things we're going to talk about today is how to properly wick your candle jars. Um, as many of you may know, we have probably close to 1,000 different jars right now. I don't test all of them because I don't have to. One of the things that you will learn in your journey is that a lot of this is muscle memory. And once you get to a point where you're making hundreds of thousands of candles, you do not have to test every single candle. You know what the wick is going to do, you know what the wax is going to do. And so at some point, you have to trust yourself to make the right decision, and you have to start selling because once you sell, volume will get you better. Um, you can get close, but perfection is never going to happen. And again, there's so many different things because, like, for instance, I had a box of wicks. I buy them by the pallet, and the whole batch, something was wrong with the batch. It had absolutely nothing to do with me. And so that particular batch of candles that we made didn't burn properly. We had to redo the order, but I went back to the manufacturer because, there was a problem with the wick. So it could be any number of things. So the point that I'm making is get it close and you'll get better. You don't need to spend a year testing candles. That's ridiculous. Um, in my opinion, I think 2 months is more than enough time because at that point you're seeking perfection and you're not going to get it. So let's move on. I'll get off my soapbox about perfection. So a lot of people that I see out there that are asking about candles and how to wick them are not measuring. I have some samples on my desk I'm going to use. Okay. So the very first thing that you want to do when you need to figure out what size wick to use for your candle is you have to measure it. You have to measure the diameter of the jar. That is essential. You cannot just throw any wick in there. You have to measure it. This is of utmost importance. And I think this may be why a lot of people are struggling because they're not measuring the jar. You have to measure it. So, first thing you want to do, and I keep this, I have 3 or 4 of these tape measures. I keep them close by. I have them everywhere because I can't remember. For the most part, probably I would say about 60 or 70 jars that we have, I know what size wick it needs. And most of the time I can eyeball it, but I don't trust myself to eyeball it. I measure it every time. So you want to take your tape measure it across the front, just like this. So this particular one is about 3 3/4. It's a little less than 4. So since it's really close to 4 and it's in between 3 3/4 and 4, I would probably go with the 4. So what we're gonna do for the sake of this exercise, and for those of you who are listening on the podcast, I would encourage you to watch the YouTube because I'm doing visuals on there's a video so you can see exactly what it is that I do. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you guys to Makesy. So this is where I purchased the jar. And let me see, I'm going to try to share my screen if I can. Got to figure out how to share the screen. I guess I should have done this before I started recording. Hold on. Share screen. Share. Share. Okay. Well, I'm not going to be able to see myself and do this at the same time, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so I'll walk you through what I do. So this particular jar came from Makesy. So I'm going to go to Makesy. I call it Wooden Wick because that's what it was in the beginning. Go to the jar. So this particular jar is the large aura. So I'm going to go to the large aura. Oh, here it is. I'm sorry. I can't see. And most of the time, they will tell you what size a jar is. So this particular one is telling you right here, the top diameter is 3.45 inches. So you have the diameter, okay? The next thing I do is I take that information and I go over to Candle Science because I get all of my wicks from Candle Science. You go to Candle Science, you go to candle making supplies, then candle wick. If you go down toward the bottom of the page, it says see wick guide. Hit that. So this is the wick guide. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. These people have done all the testing. Just use the information that's there because you're creating work for yourself when you don't use the information that you already have. They have already tested the wicks with the wax. You don't need to do that. They've already telling you what size you need to use. You don't have to figure anything out on your own. They've already done all the work, okay? So right here, it's going to ask you to choose your wax. Whichever wax you're using, choose your wax. So let's say for this particular one, I'm using 6006 because I use quite a bit of that. So I'm going to look for 6006, which is right here. Then I'm going to go to my container size, and it was 3.4 something. So right here, it says extra large 3.3 to 3.79. So you click that. It's telling you to use the Eco 10. Now, most of the time, I wick up because, like I said, this jar, and again, you'll learn this through repetition. Repetition, repetition, repetition. The more you do it, the better you get, especially if you're using the same jar. If you're using the same jar, I will probably test it at least once. Test it with what they're telling you to use and wick up one. So if it's saying equal 10, then I would do a test with the equal 10 and equal 12. Burn it for 4 hours only. 4 hours. You should have a complete melt pool. If you don't have a complete melt pool at the 4-hour point, do it again. Burn it for 4 hours because ideally at 4 hours you should have a complete melt pool across the top of your candle. And that's pretty much it. It's really that simple. So again, measure, use the wick chart. I use Candle Science because it's always been good and I've never had any issues with it for the most part. If something looks a little weird, then I'll test it or I'll use my better judgment for the wick. But for the most part, their wicks are their wick measurements and their guidance is pretty much on target. I mean, they're really good. They've done all the testing and all that. And you got to remember too, if you're using like a 464, a natural 100% soy wax, it burns slow. This paraffin blend burns fast, so you got to wick down. So when you're using like a 6006, you got to wick down because that wax burns much faster. And so what you don't want is a crazy melt pool. And I probably should have burned the candle so that I can show you. Your melt pool shouldn't be more than 1/2 inch. I mean, it should be really, really nice. You should not have a melt pool that's this thick. Like it should be a really nice, small melt pool. The glass shouldn't be getting overheated. It should be, your flame should be the proper size because What happens is if you don't measure your glass, and let's just say you put the wrong size wick, you're going to end up with one of two problems. Either if the wick is too small, the wick will not give you enough flame to heat the wax to give you a proper melt pool, and it's going to extinguish itself in the end. Or you're going to end up with a big torch, a flame that's huge, which now is a fire hazard. It's going to make the glass too hot, and the glass could possibly break because the wax is going to get too hot. So you have to measure. Once you measure and you get it right, then it just becomes repetition, especially because most of you are using the same jars for the most part. My situation is a little different because we're using hundreds, almost 1,000 different types, brands of jars. For the most part, we probably use about, if I had to guess, we're probably using about 200 jars consistently. The other ones, not so much, but 200 we're using consistently. So you know what goes in there. But if you're using one, you definitely should know what wick goes in there. So I would recommend, again, test it a couple of times, but we're not testing for years. You need to pull the trigger. But understand that there's a process. You have to measure. You should not be just throwing any type of wick in there without looking to see what's supposed to go in there. Make sure that you're using the correct size, because there are different types of wicks. And with the different types of wicks, they interact differently with different types of wax. But again, they've already done all the research, so you don't have to do all that testing. Like, I don't understand why people want to use the wrong wick with the wax. It's like the people have done the testing. This is time that you could be selling your product. So utilize the knowledge that's out there. Utilize the assistance that's there for you. You can even call Candle Science. They will talk to you. I have a person that's assigned to my business that whenever we have an issue, I talk to him directly. He's the only person that I speak to. And just make life easier for yourself. But the biggest thing is to remember, you are not perfect. There will never be a perfect candle. Don't try to attain perfection, because you're a human being. It's a handcrafted item, and people are expecting it to be a little imperfect because it's handcrafted. It's not made by a machine, and you're not a machine. So once you understand that, and kind of, for me, this is not, I'm not personally attached to these candles. It's a product. I don't feel any kind of way about it. But what I've noticed, this is observation, that you have a personal attachment to the candle, and it's like, you don't want to, you want to hold on to it, and you want to make sure it's cute, and no, let's just sell. We need to sell. That's the whole reason for doing this, is to sell. Unless you're doing it as a hobby, of course. Then, of course, you can take 2 years to test. But yeah, we're not doing that over here. We are pressing the gas, and we are making the money. So if you have any questions, let me know. You can reach me at info@floridawick.com. You can put a comment on the podcast. Again, this will be on YouTube as well, just in case you want to see the visual. And I appreciate you, and have a wonderful day.